I'm Sarah Sandler. I'm an Associate Director of Business and Program Development here at the Milken Institute, and I am delighted to be joined by Mickey Drexler this morning.
Thank you.
Chairman and CEO of J.Crew. He has led companies like Ann Taylor, The Gap. He sits on the board of Apple, and is quite a visionary, and I'd like to just sort of jump in and get started. If you want to tell us a little bit about your journey through business and how you ended up here.
Here, like today in my life.
Yeah.
So, well, I always start by saying it starts at birth, because it's not really a journey through business. It's kind of a journey through life, but that would take hours to say how I ended up here. But essentially, I kind of began my life. Well, you know, I do think there's something about growing up in the Bronx. I don't know if there's anyone from the Bronx, but I'm a borough boy, and I think you learn quickly, and I'm very loyal to my roots. But I don't think ending up here is necessarily, you know, no, I never thought about ending up here per se. I always kind of worked hard at jobs, not at school. And, you know, I kind of say that at times, not to be a renegade or the grades don't matter or so on and so forth. But I went to public schools, City College for 2 years. I graduated from Buffalo. So I kind of saw the world through my own eyes, which was the eyes of wanting to get out of my Bronx world, although I'm active in the Bronx now in certain educational areas, et cetera. But, you know, when you get here, you look back and then you say, well, that made sense and that made sense. But everyone goes the way they feel they should go, and I've always operated on internal gut instinct, but started to use that more externally over the last 10 or 15 years and say it. Do you want to interrupt, or am I just going to go?
I'll let you go for a little bit.
Okay. Well, I always worked as a kid because I had to. My father forced me to work. I didn't have a great relationship with him, but I thank him for his unreasonableness about every kid should work, and so on and so forth. And I had a lot of menial jobs, liking the boss when I was a kid or not liking the boss, and so on and so forth. So it was an enormous work ethic. He worked in the garment business, and he was a button and piece goods buyer. My mom was a secretary at the YMHA. You know, work was work. Lived in the Bronx, never went any place. I look at my kids and all the kids today, and they, you know, I got a resume the other day. It said, and I interview all the college seniors who passed the first level or round, and I actually interview a lot of people in the first round. So one woman's resume said she's been to 19 countries. So I said, so what? You know, you had, you know, 19 countries. Or, you know, what does studying abroad mean? I kind of like to be contradictory. I grew up kind of thinking, you know, I never liked arrogant people. I never liked big shots, because that was my father's reflection. He was kind of an angry guy, but that's how you get to certain places you go to. Yeah. And, but, you know, you look at all the resumes, and I call them manufactured kids. I always look for those resumes that aren't manufactured. You know, they go and they rebuild roads in countries, and then they pay $10,000 to do that, and then they probably tear down the roads for the next summer group who all come from privileged families, and they pay another $10,000. So I'm kind of looking for the angle. I'm looking for those that are ambitious, but it's hard to explain, because when you're face to face, it's different than a resume. And I've been trying to correlate my entire life, well, I don't try, resumes and success, and it doesn't compute.
So I want to go back to something that you said about looking at different types of bosses. And there was actually, I don't know if anybody saw, but there was an article that came out this morning on Business of Fashion. And you said, I wish I had a boss like me in my early years. Can you tell us why?
Well, I said that in my later years because, you know, you don't reflect as much. I worked for 3 big department store companies for my first 12 years of my career, and really had fun in only my first 2 years because I was pretty much on my own. I had what I would call my only mentor was a woman named Katie Murphy, who died quite young. We went off to Europe, we traveled, and we just bought goods that we liked. It was purely, did it look good, did it feel good? And then there's that merchant instinct you have. But I find that bosses, and there's probably a lot here, by definition in certain environments, don't really listen to young people. They never listened to me, my first 12 years. They judged a lot of things, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, on how you worked it. Maybe the results weren't as important, because it's always hard in corporations sometimes to see one's results. Now in my case, I was a buyer at Bloomingdale, so the results were there every day. Department 381, 383, here's how the swim and t-shirt business is, and this is how the sweater business is. So I love that fact. Now when you start moving up the ladder, in my opinion, because a lot of people here probably move up ladders, they're successful, they run big organizations, I really wasn't very good politically. And I found also there was somewhat of a civil service mentality in where I was, where, you do your time, and then I quit the first job. I resented who got promoted. I quit my second job. It was a mistake. I was there only a year. And my third job, I suffered through 4.5 years of misery. Now, I had to pay the bills, because a lot of, I love kids. I have a daughter at college, my son's out working and all that, but they don't seem to have to go to work a day after they graduate from college. But that was the training. So you can't have the luxury of picking the best job, and the pressures today are enormous in terms of trying to figure out what you want to do. But so I worked for 12 years, didn't like it, and I got some really great advice from a guy I don't talk to anymore. You evolve with your friends and so on and so forth. I was offered the CEO job at Ann Taylor. I was 35 years old. When you live in Manhattan, as a lot of you know, it always took a bundle of money to live well. But I wasn't thinking along those lines. I had a nice salary, a nice living. You lived never in a nice apartment when you're young in New York, unless you're a hedge fund person today or whatever. And so I ran Ann Taylor. Within 6 months, a big bad department store group was buying. It was owned by a small group. They owned Brooks Brothers, which was a great franchise in those days. They owned Ann Taylor and a lot of now out-of-business department stores. He said to me, I said no on the job twice, and he said, I'd rather run a $25 million money-losing business, which it was, than be a vice president of a $500 million company. The next morning, and this is all serendipitously, he was over my house for dinner Sunday night. He was about 20 years older than me and successful, which I guess I measured as having a lot of money. I don't measure that as successful anymore. I really don't. But he had a lot of money to me, which was a Cadillac maybe and a Mercedes in those days. It didn't take much. So I called and I took the job at Ann Taylor. Then 6 months, saddest day of my life. Big bad people took us over, bureaucrats. It was horrible, but I stayed for 4 years. I learned how to run a company. I didn't have a grand plan. You didn't say, oh, I'm going to stay here 4 years, then I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You look back and is that A-Rod? What's up, man? You want to learn a little about baseball? Okay, I see. Anyway, so I did that, I quit, I moved to California. And you want to interrupt me for questions, or no?
So what was after Ann Taylor?
Well, Ann Taylor, it was very funny. We don't have that much time, but it was a real corporate. It was Allied Stores. You probably know. Jonathan and I. He's been in front. We haven't seen each other in a while. But you remember Allied Stores? They were in the Grace Building, and this is really true. They had a bunch of bureaucrats who spent all day literally doing nothing. But every morning at 9 there was a desk check. This is true. Every afternoon at 10 to 5, there was a desk check. The chairman's secretary walked around. And during the day, they were at the Yale Club having lunch and getting whatever. So I hated it enormously. I quit Friday. I moved to California. I met Don Fisher 6 months prior. Anyway, long story short, I said, I can't afford to live in New York. We couldn't. We had one kid. Took 14 years for the second kid to come, but whatever. And we couldn't afford, I was on the board of my co-op, and the New Yorkers understand this. Like Terry, you understand this. So I said, what are we going to do? We can't live, although we did have a weekend house in the Hamptons, so we were all leveraged. Anyway, I got the job offer. The Gap offered me to start. Is this going too much detail?
No.
So
Gap was the next step.
All right,
Tell us about it.
So Don said the Gap is going nowhere, and this is an important lesson for me. It was going nowhere. We need to start a new company. Now, I had in my desk drawer at my last job, because I had a desk drawer of 20 things I dreamt about selling in my own store. Now, if I knew then what I knew now about raising funds, now it's much easier to raise funds than it was in the early 80s. I had a list of 20 things. Anyway, I chatted with Don. I finally said, I can't take this job for two reasons. One, Gap's going to go bankrupt. And then where does that leave me with my little tiny startup? And number two, I don't want to live in California anyway. Long story short, I moved to San Francisco, did a very creative deal. We indexed the price of co-ops in Manhattan. So worst case is if I got fired like my three predecessors, I could afford to trade up on an apartment. That's all I thought about. It's true. And that was in my contract for years. In fact, we had a huge fight over that because I wanted it to remain in my contract. So we did Gap, had the 20 items, and culturally it was a nightmare. California, San Bruno, across from a cemetery and the airport, coming from 57th and 5th, the headquarters of Van Taylor. I use the term headquarters lightly. There was like 60 of us. And I spent 18 years. We started Old Navy, we started Hemisphere, which failed. I got fired in my 18th year,
And then J.Crew.
And I was pissed off, and I was told to leave that day. That's a whole other 3 hours of what happened when I was fired.
So how do you get excited about the next thing then?
Well, I get excited every day because I live a lot in my imagination. And I also live in the world of what's next and what can one do.
So let's talk about that, the imagination a little bit. And I know that for you, creativity is very important, and that
along
can mean
with
a lot
good
of
math.
things.
People say it's along with good math. It's
So what does
really
that mean?
important. Well, it's business, and creativity without business doesn't mean much. It means how do you make a profit in the right way. And I've always was really good in math. Now, again, I connect the dots backwards. So you're good in math. You kind of read selling reports. You read trends. And creativity is, by the way, there's no such job that does not require creativity. And I don't mean in accounting doing funny things.
Yeah.
I mean figuring out how to do things in a better way.
Yeah.
And operationally, customer service, in product, it's always reading where the future's going, but knowing where it is. But I don't define creativity in a way most people do. I think it's initiative. I think it's always every day figuring out a better way. But I get excited because I live a bit in the future and I live in the present, and I love the challenge and I love the change, and it's my sport. Now, not that I had a great 40-year career. Believe me, a lot of days at Gap I was kind of miserable. Here I'm kind of happy.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with politics, you're dealing with people, now when I say miserable, the first 3 years was tough because adjusting as a New Yorker to a culture in San Francisco, I'm sure there's some San Franciscans here, it's different. New York is like you know them in a minute, and there you know them in 10 years, and it's a whole different vibe going on.
Yeah.
But so it was a very difficult transition for me and my family. But then we lived there, and I was fired like that. Moved back, invested in J.Crew. And I always admired J.Crew from the day Emily started the catalog. The police are coming. I'm not saying anything wrong, am I?
No.
There's 3 policemen here. I'm thinking, Anyway, okay, I got distracted.
So you're at J.Crew, and actually, you just mentioned the catalog. So J.Crew started as a catalog business.
As part of Popular something or other, yeah.
Yeah, and moved to bricks and mortar, and now obviously has a great online presence. And can you talk about sort of the evolution of that, and also sort of the evolution of how the industry is changing as a whole?
Well, the industry is changing. Look, the world is like, I can't even believe what's happening in the last 10 years. It's beyond my imagination ever. Because every year is like, it used to be, it's like 10 years in the past. It's so dramatically switching, changing, moving, yada, yada, yada. When I went to J.Crew, I always say to young people who I speak to a fair amount, you know, it takes, to run an organization, you must have a vision. And now this is, again, personal opinion, and it's the kind of thing I look at. And by the way, there's a lot of companies I would fail miserably at running because I don't really have a lot of patience. But you know, patience to do things the way they've done, patience to not take the appropriate risks, patience to not follow your gut, and patience to really have to always let your boss know this is why you're doing it. And you get worn down in environments that are not creative. So I said, the reason I'd like to work now for someone like myself is, and by the way, I've worked for people who say, just do it. You know, people, they say do it, they might not understand it, but you make a judgment in people and you invest in people, and not in institutions, but in the people that run the institution. So, you know, I look at universities and all that. I mean, the institution's so much stronger than the leaders. I always, in business, you know, if you look at great companies, you look at the leaders. So that's been with me. So I look at a company, I look at the leader. I look at the company, I look at the leader. I look at results, I look at the leader. Or you can look at companies that grow 8 or 10% every year. They don't take risks, but the CEOs stay in their jobs long term. They have nice, they do have great salaries and perks and airplanes and all that. But, and I couldn't have lived that life. Anyway, you get to J.Crew, every day you're learning. Before I got there, I bought a name called Madewell. By the way, we have I don't know if we gave out a Madewell card today to the women.
We do have gift cards.
Because we're giving like a J.Crew gift card. And
on your way out, you'll get them.
We're only giving a 20% off on the Ludlow suit, which sounds a little chintzy to give a discount, but it's too late.
Well, let's actually talk about the Ludlow suit. So,
no, but Madewell. But I just want you to say, when you're looking out there, and I learned a lot from Steve Jobs, who I always respected, because you're always thinking long term. You're thinking out of the box, and then you're there day to day, tactical then strategic, tactical and strategic, and I think anyone creative has to be that way to satisfy the creative demands you have. But I bought the name Madewell before I joined J.Crew. I don't know how many, the guys probably don't know what Madewell is. I hope some of the women do.
The women.
You get a free discount card. If you like Madewell, see me after. You want free jeans? You got it. No, seriously, you got the jeans. Because, so I bought the name. A guy I knew came up and said, what do you think of this name? Now, this is the imagination. You know, like I said to someone the other day, I said, if I were running pennies, you know, and I was involved in the early things with not in the business part, and I said, can you imagine the asset of having a company named James Cash Penny? I said, it's like the greatest name you can have for a retailer.
Yeah.
And then but they don't use the name.
Yeah.
Cash Penny. And then you have JCP in a box. But even before that, it's not pennies. It should be James Cash. Now, so I had a little argument with a few people, having my wife and my son. And they said, what a terrible name. I said, you can't argue about that.
Yeah.
Right? Steve Jobs named the iPad the iPad. We all thought it was crazy.
And look at it now.
And you know, that's what I admired about him. No fear.
Yeah.
That's the name.
Yeah.
Right? That's the name. It's iPad. He didn't do the research. Well, Madewell, I bought the name. This fellow I knew, he said, would you like to buy the name? I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Madewell since 1937. It's very hard to name things. And you know, Old Navy is a bar. I don't know if anyone's from Paris here. It's a bar. Anyone? It's a bar in the Rue Saint-Germain. So in 1993, I was driving by with Maggie, who ran marketing. We were going to the airport. Saw the bar. I said, what a name for a company. Old Navy.
Yeah.
Called the lawyer. We registered it. Now, I do find if you do what we do sometimes, you just do it then. You don't wait to pick up the phone.
You don't wait for the reason to do it.
You don't wait. And I'll never forget, I visited A.N. Pritzker with an old great friend of mine in Chicago when I was a really young guy. And we're talking to him, and I was looking for Ann Taylor's store or something. So I wasn't that young. I was youngish. And then, so the guy picks up the phone like this to call a broker. And what Dick said to me, he goes, sign of a great entrepreneur. He picks up the phone. Can't wait. You know what I mean? I never forgot that sentence. He can't wait.
Yeah.
And you really can't wait.
Yeah.
You can't wait because it's emotional part of it. So anyway, we bought the name. I paid $125,000 for the name. And I thought maybe we'd start a company called Madewell, which we did 4 years later. J.Crew was doing well. And then you have a vision, and my board has been terrific because we probably put $100 million into it. But, you know, it's the only real apparel startup in the last 10 years, I think, that's still around making money.
Yeah.
Because, you know, anyone who calls themselves online apparel today is allowed to lose money. But if you say you're bricks and mortar apparel, you have to make money.
Yeah.
So we do both. But anyway,
So can you talk a little bit about the difference in consumer between a J.Crew and a Madewell, and how you go about reaching a specific audience like that?
Well, yeah, we treat them. We have different design teams. There's overlapping of Jenna Lyons and myself, and some of the teams. You know, it's hard to explain it, but it's all, you know. J.Crew's is slightly a little older, much more broadly based. Madewell, well, the women can probably tell you better than I, right? Madewell's, well, we're making it into we want to be a great jeans company. Have you tried the new jeans?
No, I wear the J.Crew.
Which, oh, you have the maternity jeans, which we just started. But I'd say Madewell it's a little sexier, hipper, younger, but cool.
Yeah.
And what? More boho chic. But if you want a great jean, Madewell and J.Crew, we've run, this is an advertisement, we've redone all the jeans this year. It's all detailed. We hired one of the great jean engineers in the world. I'm not going to say who she is or where she worked, but you know some of the, what? What'd you say? You know? You know who it is? Anyway, don't say a word. Anyway, but we, you know, Jenna found her and we said we want to fix our jeans. So it never just stops there. It never stops, and you're always working to make it better. But what was the question? So we started Madewell. We finally made a profit last year, and now we've opened our 70th. Our 69th store opened yesterday, and we're opening our 70th in the next week. And it's exciting to see things grow. It's the juice that keeps us going. You know, and yes, business has been tough. The apparel business is nothing to write home about lately. But you got to look beyond that. Hate every day of bad business, but then you've been through it and you kind of keep going. Now, there are massive changes, in my opinion. You asked that question.
Yes.
You asked about the J.Crew. And then
the evolution of catalog to bricks and mortar to online. And
it's interesting. I hope you have enough time. But in you know, you remember those things in your life? When I was a buyer at Bloomingdale's, I found that I don't know who knows Alexander's. I know you know Alexander's, right? In my company, like I'm the oldest by 20 years, no one knows any of the. Alexander's was a great discounter. And they bought all the brands the same way today that TJ Maxx does, the same way today that Kohl's does, the same way that Century 21 does, the same way that Gilt does, you name it. Now what's happened, this is many years ago. So I'm a buyer at Bloomingdale's, and I said, and you don't know you're saying it, but you're saying, I said, I go out and I buy all these nice goods, and then Alexander's puts them on sale, and we had a policy, meet the price of your competitors. So my inventory is worth half. That was 3 years, after 12 years of that, I said, there's got to be a better way. Went to Ann Taylor, finally I had my own palette. You know, when you're working in a corporation, you try to do things, you cannot do anything. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Unless maybe you're the boss's son or the boss.
Yeah.
Or the boss's daughter. Okay? You can't do a thing. If you had an idea, you know, it's like, you know, you never got respect.
Yeah.
As a young person, you just didn't get the respect. So now I had Ann Taylor. I was the president. It was a $25 million company. They didn't pay any attention to us because they had some really big problems. Garfinkel, Brooks Brothers, Miller Rhodes, Brooks Brothers then. So I took a page out of the Brooks Brothers book, Brooks Brothers and Benetton in Europe. God bless you. Now, Brooks Brothers then, and I don't know if this makes sense to anyone, it was a high integrity Brooks Brothers. Everything had their name. Now, because I saw their financials, I'm saying, my God, they are making twice the operating earnings. that all these other crappy companies, well, mine was losing money at Ann Taylor, and there was one thing, they didn't have to worry about marking down then to meet the competition. Now, I don't want to say what Brooks Brothers has done since then. You all know. Stay Press, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay? But it was a great high integrity company, which I think Ralph Lauren, he doesn't tell me this, you know, I don't speak to him, but I guess he got took a lot of pages out of their book. We all take pages out of other books. So, so with Ann Taylor, we start our own line, our own label, so we can protect the integrity of our product. Now, of course, there's Hermes, there was Louis Vuitton, which was small, and there was all these fancy high designer brands. They didn't worry about the pricing. Now, what's happened now? It's a commodity world. There's not one brand the department store sells that's not somewhere being discounted. But the other thing is, you go online, you take your device, like people say, how many stores does J.Crew? I've said about 250 million stores. You take your device, but if you go around the world and look at the brands that are being sold, discounting galore. So I always felt at Gap we had our own, and at Gap we had 20 labels, we made it all Gap. And we changed that, Banana Republic, Old Navy. So what I wanted to do was control distribution. I did not want to be in a business where, now again, I wasn't saying this to myself at a strategic meeting.
Yeah.
You kind of do it, and then when you look back, you say, oh,
You're like, oh, I had a strategy there.
yeah, right. Oh, I had a strategy. Because it wasn't like we had strategy meetings, which maybe you do and you do this, but a lot of, and I think a lot of companies are led by the sense of the leader. And then you're selling to a degree. You don't like James Cash Penny, and within 5 minutes I had my family like, what a great name, you know? but I think you do a lot of things. Steve Jobs, I'm not name dropping Steve, he's one of the greatest leaders the world's ever seen, and it's all proven that he was. But he didn't have to explain it. So you do what you do as a leader. So at Gap, Old Navy, Banana, name protected. So right from the beginning, that was the mission. Now today, it's a really different game because we have a test in our company. Well, we have two tests. I just say this. One is try to get in touch with the CEO of a company. Very difficult. You could be a great customer. Try. Especially the phone companies when you have a problem. You know what I mean? I had it with Mercedes too. I kept telling everyone, I have a Mercedes, I've been a customer for a long time. I can't get through to the North American CEO. I have a problem, I want to see what he does. Part of it was a test and a game.
Yeah.
So, so what we do is we go online and we see where you can buy what. Now, I won't tell you who the biggest discounter is today because they don't call themselves a discounter. But you look at it, it's a problem facing all of us. The amount of goods being discounted is extraordinary. The most profitable, my friend runs this company, she says, don't ever name this. The most valuable retailer, one of them, is a discounter. Forget, I don't count Walmart. Okay, I'm not counting them. I'm saying the labels that you see around have very little integrity. People, any retailers here, by the way? Anyone in retail? Where do you work?
We have furniture.
Where?
We have a furniture company.
Okay, so
Furniture business.
fine, because it's too late on the apparel thing. I've said it all, but but which company?
Theodore Alexander.
Okay, so so you go online, you look at all the stuff that's available, and it's an issue for us. So I always like to control our distribution. We're not a wholesaler. The problem with not being a wholesaler is, look, benefits and negatives. Steve Jobs, when I met Steve, came to me, well, now it's 14 years ago, and Steve could be very charming when he wants something. He could also not be, if he doesn't get it. You know what I mean? But he came to me and he said, I want to do with Apple what you do. And I didn't know from Apple and computers and yada yada. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I want to open my own stores because I can't depend upon Best Buy, Circuit City, Computer Store, whoever else is there or not there anymore. He said, I need to have a vision of, in his words, but he recognized that. And he did it brilliantly. He put, and of course he did the products. Now, he did everything along with just having his own store. But so that's really been, for me, what goes on. Now today, a discount is within a finger away. when I was younger, a discount, you had to drive 50 miles to the factory stores, or you had to drive 50 miles to
The
wherever they
outlets.
sold, this designer, the outlets. Go online today.
Yeah.
It's all online, it's all there, which I think is deteriorating the business to a degree, but it's also, to me, the entire online business is a deflationary business. Because, if Tesla lost their suit wherever they lost it, but who needs to buy a car at a dealer anymore? In fact, who wants to? I hope there's no car dealers here. I'm sorry if I. Oh, you are. I'm sorry, but you have the license that protects you, right? So you don't have to worry about my saying this. But I think everything is direct, and everything is going that way. So online.
Do you think that the online business complements the?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Online complements it. When we go online and we open a new store, for example, we opened stores in the UK. We had an online business. It's up about 70 or 80%. It's not that big yet, but once we had a presence, we're opening in Hong Kong in a month from now, and now we have some publicity of the 2 stores are opening. The Hong Kong online business is going this way. I think it's both. Plus, I do think there's a real live thing about having a store versus just being online.
So once you sort of build that presence with the store and the online starts going up, do you still need to keep the store around, or does the online sort of take it from there?
I'm not smart enough to have that answer because, who knows what the Google boys are working on now? It might be like in your ear, you look at clothes, you try it on. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's, as long as you're open to reacting, I kind of look at, if you're driving a car down a road and there's no signs and there's a detour, I look at running a business today. There's no grand long-term plan because guaranteed. I mean, you have a vision long-term, but within the vision, day in, day out, there's huge opportunity. There's huge negatives. There's things that change, and in our business, every day there's a signal, in my opinion, about what's going to sell and what's not going to sell.
Where do you see those signals? How do you make those decisions?
You live your life. You walk around. If you just look and you, like I have this rule of 2 or 3. It's a silly rule because if it's 2 or 3 things I hate, then I don't pay attention.
Yeah.
But if you start to see something trend-wise. Now, there's 2 things, actually. It's really hard. I'm trying to think. Liz, are you here about the things I see? What do I see? Liz travels around. She hangs out. We go around. We see, right? If you mention anything, the obvious that I live with every day, but I will have alerts all the time in the company. I get on the phone, and I have a loudspeaker, by the way, which I did 11 years ago when I joined J.Crew, and I'll tell you why. If you needed something then, and no one didn't answer their phone.
You're just reaching everyone.
And you know what's happened? It's an ongoing, I find it creates a smallness. It creates, and we don't have offices. I always had offices.
You do this when you're on the road.
I call in from every store I visit. I was in Detroit yesterday on the way here. You call in and you call up. Well, yesterday I was complaining about there's no socks in the Somerset Mall in Madewell. It's a big sock business. Now, I'm really pissed about this because every time I go, and I never speak to, you can speak to anyone in corporate. They give you bullshit. They cover their ass. You speak to a store manager, say, look me in the eye, right?
Why aren't there socks here?
You look me in the eye, and then you find out the truth because we get along.
Yeah.
And so you call up, and the sock thing's been going on for 2 years. The merchant, for some reason, and she's in trouble now. She knows it.
Yeah.
She's been in trouble. but you go around and you see things like with socks. If you have an imagination, if you feel it, there's a feel part and there's an execution part. And I don't know how you spot it, but Liz, you want to help me here? You have any examples? Call them out. What?
The
fatigue jacket. Yeah, or the downtown field jacket. I don't know if anyone owns that here. You have the
got a hand up in the back, Liz.
Now, yeah. So you see that jacket. I see it all the way on the streets. The designers said it's not good anymore. Well, who's to say it's not good? The designers love to design and then get rid of it. Design, get rid of it. So I look at the Mercedes grill, the BMW grill, the Audi grill, and then I look at GM cars. And GM's, forget what they did, it's terrible. But there's a consistency in great branding and an evolving of product. Now in the fashion business, you got to keep moving forward while you maintain. Now you asked me about the Ludlow suit?
Yes, the Ludlow suit. And actually, do you want to roll the video really quickly? And
Sure. Now this is a video. Now, to try to understand what we do, it's not me. It's Jenna, it's Margot, it's Samsak who designs. So you have to create an environment where people know there's no rules of it's not right. Now, we say no many more times, but this is an interesting video. I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Casey Neistat. Anyone ever hear of him? N-I-E-S-T-A-T, I think Casey. He's a crazy man. He's now at MIT studying something, but he graduated years ago. He has a 16-year-old kid, he's 31. I think, is this the Traveler video?
Yes.
You know Casey? So anyway, so Casey, they found Casey. He does work for us. He works.
You got to stay over here.
I was just going to go look at the video. Is that it? Oh, I can see this one? Oh, it's up there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize it was up there. So, so anyway, this is the Traveler video. We invented the Ludlow suit. Don't start it yet. Did you started it? You didn't start it. Don't start it.
Oh, can you hold it for a sec?
Stop. I want to give you some context. No, can you?
Oh, can you hold the video for a sec? Thank you.
Thank you. 3 years ago, we said, and it's simple, men's is easier than women's. We said, you go buy a suit. There's 50 choices. None of them are friendly. You got someone trying to sell you a suit. So we said, now, I don't know the beginnings of this. You say, well, let's have one simple suit. First of all, we wanted a more narrow lapel because a lot of guys, we thought, well, you also see, if you see 10 guys wearing narrower lapels or more narrow ties, every guy's looking at their lapel now. Right? You got a wide lapel, right? So you start looking. Now, I also work in an environment with 1,000 too cool people, you know what I mean? It's, they're all so cool, the men and women, and they are, because this is their life of being cool. Now, that's inspirational in itself. So we looked at it and said, let's invent or develop a suit that every guy can understand. Long story short, we said double vents, 2 buttons, not 3, and you can argue all day long. And then you can say, well, someone said, well, I want a single vent. I said, well, that's okay. You can't be all things to all people. Have a point of view. So we invented the Ludlow. It's all Italian fabrics, the best fabrics. It's made in a great factory in China, which a lot of things are made in China today because you can't afford it if it's not. And even Prada handbags, I'm told, are made in China, but no one knows that because then they ship them back. They are. They're made in China.
Yeah.
Just do your research. I don't know. I'm told this. Are they? You know. They're made in China. So there's ways to get around it. I guess we proudly say made in China, great men's factory. And we started to market it, and it became a brand unto itself, Ludlow. We have it now in 20 ways, one suit. We're introducing another one next fall for a guy who's a little more athletic, just 1/8 of an inch on the lapel. Well, you can't wear any of our suits, man. You're too big. And then we did the shirts. We now have shoes. But this is Casey. And then we said, what about a traveler suit? Now, it's not new, but you want to shove it into your suitcase. You want to just travel with it. And guys are easier than women because the guy has, he's really simple about things. He doesn't want to be bothered. The woman has that other sense. Anyway, we did a traveler suit, worked on the fabric. It's in the Ludlow. It's been like a rocket. And this is, we had 100, now I'm not sure what this means. Those of you in technology, like 159 million impressions on this on YouTube, and it's on our website. All right, so now here's Casey Neistat. So that's Casey. Anyway, by the way, he did this completely on his own. He went around the world. I think went to 6 or 7 countries. They stopped him on the airplanes, but he got his footage, and then they'd stop him.
Yeah.
But if you meet Casey, that's Casey.
Yeah.
And you can't put any parameters around him. Mm-hmm. He's doing more work for us. And if you see he has a snowboard video in the streets of New York and Brooklyn. I don't know if you've seen this video. It's extraordinary. A Jeep is pulling him through Brooklyn, and he's on, what's the thing, on a snowboard, right?
Yeah.
On a snowboard or whatever board. Anyway.
So with the success of that suit, when you look at other pieces that have been successful over time and have taken off, how do you make those sustainable?
Well, in fashion, it's always evolving. Look, it's the same thing in any business. It's evolving new product. And I think, you evolve. You don't want to reinvent. You want to be consistent. The biggest mistakes I know in my own personal experiences when we, and this is more so, well, it happened here. You kind of go out and the people don't recognize who you are. You go here because you're chasing a competitor, or you go there. And I think consistency is critical.
In creating an identity?
Well, I think it's critical in any consumer experience. It's creating identity, but a comfort level. And so we always try to have an emotional connection to the consumer and really be open and honest about what we do. It wins a lot, and sometimes you don't win. And picking clothes is not easy. But what's happened in the world today is the online environment has made shopping a lot different. And it's been a huge game changer.
Does it change what people buy?
It changes what they value. I think the best sellers are the best sellers. No, it doesn't. I mean, our assortments worldwide are pretty consistent, but I think it changes their perception of what something is worth. And it's happening more and more, and I think there's this huge joining of retail and factory, and in the world today, the discounters are everywhere. Look at Nordstrom's. They're expanding their factory business much more rapidly, I believe, than their regular store business. Now, at some point, there's always oversupply. There's certainly enough apparel retailers in the world today out there. You don't need that many more. There's enough car makers, there's enough of everything. But the ones that'll stand out are the ones that do it best, who are long-term consistent, and are willing to be long-term. I think running a company, it's not just, sometimes people say, oh, you turn something around. It's not turn around. You take on a job, you fall in love with it, or get out. Turning around and cutting expensive is not building. You can cut expenses, and then what do you have? You will do well in the stock market, because the stock market, as my good friend Josh Weston says, I don't know if anyone knows Josh from ADP, who's a wonderful guy, who's a director. He says he wrote a letter to Channel 13, I guess, the public station in New York, saying, please don't refer to investors as investors anymore. He said, call them traders. He said 90% of the stocks are traded and they're not invested. I don't know if you agree with that, Jonathan, but I loved his letter to the CEO of the network. But I think it's true. So if you have to have a strong stomach, you have to take the good with the bad, and then you have to be an owner. And 3 years does not make a company. 3 years does not make a car company. 10 years probably makes a great car company, maybe 15. I don't know, I've never been in the car business. Although Steve Jobs always said he wanted to, if he lived, he was going to do an iCar, which one can only imagine.
What that could be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think we want to maybe take some questions from the audience. Does anybody want to be the first? Looks like we have one over here. Questions?
That's you, right? That's her, right?
Oh,
Who'd you wear?
I pointed to the guy with the mic.
I'm sorry.
We'll get you next.
Hi, I'm Andrew Heffernan from Ireland. Do you see, I think about in the industry, it's always about key items. Do you see a world where it's going towards single companies, single products? So for example, people, they have their brand they buy flip-flops from, they have their brand they buy socks from, they have their brand they buy their suit from. What's your view on that?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's both. And I don't think you can be profitable. Again, this is always my personal opinion. We talk about that a lot. Jenna Lyons will say, you can't just do items, and like we have a fight or something, whatever our version of a fight is. I said, I'm not trying to do items only. You've got to have the assortment. But the revenue and the profit does come from the great items or categories in the business. The problem with single item companies, well, to me, I don't like to mention names of companies, but what's the company with the furry in lining? Everyone, the what? I didn't mention it, but you know, that was a single product company.
Tricky.
I think it's a bit of a danger if you don't evolve the product. And I also think sometimes you invent something and enjoy the ride. And maybe that's an example of it. Because, you know, that's one example maybe, but single products look, companies don't live forever. And I think, you know, it's always more fun to create it, drive it, build it, and then let it, you know, I mean, I really wanted to get out of Gap 5 years before I got out of there. Because, you know, you kind of see certain things happening in the world. Now, I wasn't a victim, but, you know, when you have a job, it owns you as much as you own it if you feel a passion and emotional attachment to it. But I think it's a really good point. If you look at what Airbnb has done to Craigslist, you know what I mean? I mean, they have this assortment on Craigslist. They went in and they said, we'll do this better. What we try to do, I'm not giving up any trade secrets, it's obvious, is we try to take categories and build, I call it get famous for a category, build it. But those categories like ballet flats, they will never last long term. What happens in the apparel and fashion business is it gets slowly eaten up. If you look at camouflage now, you know, it's in every store from nickel and dime stores to designers. So it's a message. It's kind of connecting dots, and that's what you see out there. But I think you make a really good point. Be famous for what you're famous for, but not just an assortment business.
Yeah. I think we have one down here.
Mickey, can you elaborate a little bit on your, I guess, your rule of 2 out of 3, or how you use your gut?
The rule of, yeah, I just made that up kind of today, but it makes sense. No, I go around and, you know, you see things in the world. We all see things differently. Like, you know, we're all literate and illiterate in categories because, you know, like I interview everyone except people in technology when they come to the company. I don't know what they're saying, so it doesn't matter. But I do see, I like to see trends. I feel them, I see them, and then Liz, I wish you'd help me here on certain trends that I see. If I read about something.
Well, what about in the article I read this morning? You were talking about skirts.
Yeah, well, it's skirts. We have a photo studio in our building, you know, just for the online, and hats. Hello, hats, skirts. What? Tunics? Well, that was like, what? Down. Okay, thank you, Liz. Okay. No, you see it, like if you hang around in our building and you see every cool guy, and in New York City, I know it's crazy, but you're not going to get it on the streets of LA because there's really no streets. So if you get it, if you walk around, you see every guy wearing a knit hat, or every guy wearing one of these hats, or at a photo shoot one day, I walk in, I see 3 of the 5 women, they're cool, wearing a skirt, but it's a certain type of skirt, not the slim, straight skirt that was hot 2 years ago. You then start to look into things. And like a woman yesterday in Detroit was wearing a flare jean. She looked fantastic. Now, you got to then watch it. So we all said, wow, did you see how so-and-so looked? It was a Madewell flare, sold out to the piece. We only bought a few hundred, which is way too little. And I called our denim guru, and I said, should we go after flares? She goes, it's too late now. Flares are a early spring thing. I trust her implicitly. So that's it. But you see trends, you see things, and then you either then say, or when we went into ballets, I'd see this little ballet shop on Lexington Avenue. You all know what it is. I won't mention the name. And I'd say, well, if that little store could do all that business selling ballet flats, you then say, we're doing it. Now, you then have to push. But then, like socks, we're doing it. Someone's got to be the do it. Because everyone will just do it as it was, rear view mirror and everything else. So that's what my job is, and I like to think that's what our job is. You see it, you feel it. The downtown field jacket, we put it away for a year or two, and every time I'd see something, so now it's become the most important. To me, it's like a Barber jacket or whatever else. It stays there. We can talk later about more. So you had something? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so you're calling?
Thanks.
He's next.
Okay.
Okay. Oh no, he's then.
We'll get you next.
Next.
Oh.
I can't hear him. Okay, after him.
So I'll hand him the mic after, if that works.
Perfect.
Great. Hey, Mickey, I'm curious, everything you've seen, can you talk about some of your biggest mistakes? Not necessarily your failures per se, but mistakes, what you learned from them structurally, and how you've allowed that to improve who you are today, professionally, personally, how you've reflected on that in life and changed as a result.
Well, it's a really good question, and your mistakes, and you probably all experience this. It's too late. You made the mistake, so all you can do is invest in figuring it out again. My biggest, this will take a long time, but I think the first best advice I got, I was interviewing at J.C. Penney when it was in New York on 6th Avenue. I'm always looking to you, because, and the guy said, the head of HR said, what? Yeah, older guys. He said, if you don't feel good in an environment, you shouldn't work in that environment. I walked out in the middle of the tour. I hated it. It was a building on 6th Avenue on the 50th floor, and now they're in Plano, Texas. But I left. I think my mistakes are, I stayed too long in a department store business. That's not a mistake. I had rent to pay, I had mortgage to pay. And a lot of it's, you don't have the luxury of your life until you're independent in a way. If, you have a family, you have to pay, and so I didn't have that until I had it. My biggest mistake at Gap, well, Steve Jobs used to tell my biggest mistake at Gap, but Steve is Steve. He will say anything he wants to anyone. I'll never forget, he says, you're the CEO, but you're not acting like it. And I said, well, there's a 30% owner, there's 3 board members from the same name, there's friends, and there's a founder. So if I had to do it over again, at Gap, I would have probably said, maybe we shouldn't have opened up so many stores. We shouldn't have bought back so much stock. I also made a terribly bad hire there, a really bad hire. And I've learned a lot about avoiding bad hires, because they go on every day in the public world today. At Gap, another huge mistake. To me, it was a mistake. I don't know if anyone remembers 1969 jeans. We launched them before anyone launched designer denim. We had a guy from Adriano Goldschmidt. He developed a jeans line. Sounded like a lot of money, $69.50. It wasn't a lot of money. We launched them. But I was the big boss, but I had all these people around me who worked for me. They were my team members. They didn't get it, and they didn't want to get it. It went like a rocket, and then it went this way because the team didn't push it, and I had a lot to do. I had all these, but I blame myself, of course, but that was a huge billion-dollar market opportunity missed at Gap. It was a turning point. Now, I'm kind of glad in hindsight I missed it because, I'm not there anymore. Started Old Navy because of Target copying Gap, by the way, which is don't tell your competition that you're going to start a new company and don't talk about it. They said we're copying Gap in a press release, cheaper prices. I went to look at it in Mall of America, and then we did all the research, our research. I said, Target's, they were called Dayton Hudson, and big smart company. I don't know if you remember Everyday Hero. So we then figured out, we found out 80% of jeans in America was sold under $35. So I'm saying you're always connecting dots. Other big mistakes, hires maybe, but then you can't, if you think about it, then you're a loser. You know what I mean? So I always say, forget it, to myself. I do think about it. But they're big ones, but then you have to win over that. Now, if you have any thoughts about our mistakes, you can let me know too.
So what do you do if if an item isn't selling today?
Good old markdown. Get rid of it, fast.
Yeah.
But the problem is you got to be careful, like the flared jeans, it's funny. There were 5 left, so they marked them down. They always say, well, there's only a few left. I said, the more you mark down, the more of a message you're giving that you can get it on sale. I said, no one knows there's 5 left if it's online. Just keep it in there or get rid of it quietly.
Yeah.
So we have sales in our office with all our fancy stuff. I'd rather give it to our associates at half cost than to put it in the store. But look, everyone has sales all the time. It's a disease in our industry.
Yeah.
It's a bad disease. He was good.
How big do you see the opportunity in Europe? I know that you're already in London, and are you looking to go elsewhere? And who do you see as the biggest competitor or the most similar
The biggest
type of
what?
offering? Similar competitor or
Well, you know,
offering?
I really don't know the answer. In my old company, didn't want to go overseas. I used to quote Ray Kroc at McDonald's, there's 5,000 restrooms till they're all clean. Why open up another restroom someplace else that might not be? We're doing very well in London. We're making plan. I don't know the answer. I'm worried about France because of the work rules. We're opening in Hong Kong next month. We're in 100 countries online, which is important. We're going slow. And I think what you've seen in America, in our industry, retailing, is the retailers go there when they have no more here. So you have these interesting companies, not so interesting. You got how many companies are closing stores here while they're opening stores there. You know, this idea of having to grow for growth's sake, it's like a bad thing in a way. Mm-hmm. But what can you do about it if you're a public company CEO and you have shareholders? But some companies should be, you can't say put them to rest. You know, it's like, but you know, you sometimes can't grow it. I have no idea. I'm worried about the work rules in certain countries. I'm worried about the tail wagging the dog. And but time will tell. You might. Where are you from? Where? London. Yeah. So I don't know how big you think we're competitors. I think J.Crew, in a funny way, kind of is out there. We're a designer company, in my opinion, because I think a woman would rather spend 4 times as much on certain things because it's a designer name. We're a designer company. We have, I like our style. I like the team style. We're not known as a prestige designer, so they don't line up to buy our goods like they do Chanel and Louis Vuitton in China. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens in Hong Kong. We do very well in Lane Crawford. We're very pleased. Where we go, we do well. But there is an environment now that's not easy right now, anywhere in the world, which you might know of.
Yeah. I think I saw a couple over here.
Hi, Mickey. Francine Lafrac, a huge fan of yours.
Is that working? Oh, louder.
I'm sorry.
Francine Lafrac.
Okay.
Oh,
hi.
Francine Lafrac.
Huge fan. Listen,
Houses. Right?
And
Houses.
same sky. Do you see a trend towards...
If you lived here, you'd be home by now?
That's correct.
On the Long Island Expressway, right?
Long Island Expressway, not at the Beverly Hilton.
Okay.
Do you see a trend at all towards ethical shopping where you know who made your product and maybe you have to pay a little more for it, but you get the good feeling of knowing that you're sort of not paying the lowest wage and you're not bargain hunting, so you have to pay a little bit more. Do you see any trend towards that?
Now, I'm not an expert, so I'm going to give you a very narrow, I don't know a lot. I know only with jeans made in America with Japanese fabric is people, authentic jeans wears like jeans made in America. Like, not this is a Wallace and Barnes jean. It's made in America, Japanese fabric. I wear it because I like the fit of it. Frankly, if there is a trend, it's among a very few people. And I think it's be a nice trend, but I don't see it because the economics overwhelm the country of origin. And then again, if I saw it, no one else will see it. Look, we have right now ropes. It's a made in Maine, handmade in Maine, fantastic bracelet, ladies. Ladies, $65. Oh, by the way, yesterday, you know, you talk about connecting dots. I was in the store, I saw 2 women wearing it. Oh, it was in Garden State Monday morning. I look at what our people wear, and they say we love the ropes bracelet. So I said, well, what are you doing about it? So they called Maine, because sometimes, you know, the merchants don't, you know, I've been doing this so many years. I said, find out what their capacity is to do this. Well, they can only make this many a year. It's in America, it's handmade. None of the American makers can make the quantity on those things that you need to make, and the needle or the make in certain countries are phenomenal. We go after that where we can. You know, we do, Leah Kabedi makes in Ethiopia. Her prices are high, but it's special in this fashion. You probably would, look, some of us would pay more, right? Madewell, which braces? Oh, is that your company?
Yes.
Oh, that's right. Fixed you up with Same Sky. Just remind me to see how well we're doing. See, that's your company. No, Francine, you sent me an email, right? Yeah, that's it. They send an email. Yeah, right. You send an email. See, you know what I do? I really think it's a matter of manners and respect. Someone sends you an email, and then they say, "Oh, thank you. I'm so surprised you got back to me." Whatever. Oh, okay, now I know. I think of you as apartments, but now I don't think of you as. Okay. All right.
I think we got it.
Lots of apartments, right?
In the back row over here.
Mickey, could you talk to us about or paint us a picture of what you see when you walk into a great retail store?
Into a what retail?
A great retail.
A great retail store.
You know, it's the same thing you see. You know, because if I walk into a retail store, a restaurant, or a hotel, or an environment, but what I actually see, well, I'll give it to you. I don't want to say it's the same. If a customer feels it, I always walk in as a customer. I feel something that you can't necessarily put in words, but I see a point of view and an opinion. I see a sales staff or a team that's energetic and feels good. I see a smile or two, not a fake "welcome to our store today" smile, but and I just feel it. But most importantly, I see a taste level that's good. It's not like I don't want to wade through the ugly. But now that's again personal. So if I go into a J.Crew store or a Madewell store, or any competitive store, I want to see, like a competitive store I love is 45 RPM. It's in Manhattan. They have 2 stores. I don't know if they do any business or not, but I find it very inspirational. It's almost like a work of art. Price is obscene, but it's an art gallery to me, but you feel it. But I always feel a sense of, I get it. It's almost a living, breathing reaction. Same with a restaurant, by the way. I can walk into a restaurant. I'm too critical in my own life. It's a problem I have. So you walk and say, "I'm out of here." You know what I mean? Or you see that because I'm so used to it. Or a hotel, it's not right. Liz knows that. We complain. I send nasty messages. I email the owners. But I always feel a picture that's been painted well. And you all interpret it in your own way, in your own manner. But it depends. A lot of guys walk in, or women, and don't see that. But yeah, I see it and I feel it. I always want to feel at home. I hate environments where they don't treat you nicely. I can't stand restaurants where they do you a favor, or a fancy designer store where you look the wrong way. Especially today, you can't tell because, you know, you got guys looking like, you know, Brian could, you know, you could be like Abramovich, right? Who knows? Right? You just don't know because you dress casually. I don't know. Maybe you are. I don't know. But whatever. So that's what I see.
Over here.
So I'm a loyal user of Bonobos pants and Bonobos generally. I was just curious what your view is of companies like Bonobos or Trunk Club and what they're doing to the future of your business. Well, I said this in my last meeting. I actually can't comment because they tend to try to hire a lot of our people. I don't know why you wouldn't shop at J.Crew, honestly, unless you have a bigger. Is it a fit thing? Well, I went to business school.
Let me hear why you shop there.
I went to business school at the same place that the founders did, so I kind of got to know it through that, and I guess.
So you know the guys.
Now you know Mickey.
Me. Liz, get him a discount card, okay? Now,
I have plenty of your stuff too. Fit-wise, it is a nice.
No, you have the fit. Okay, don't tell Andy I said all this. You got a discount card already? No, but I mean,
it's nice.
but I think it's okay. You know,
wasn't what I was angling for.
What?
You know.
I know, but I'm angling for you as a customer, so you know.
Exactly.
No, look, the problem is that there's no problem with them. They're trying hard. Look, I got a little mad at Andy because he interviews all our people. You know what I mean?
Well, he claims that you're his role model, right?
I know, but he ought to have a little more respect then. No, I think, look, I wish them well, as anyone would wish their competitors. Look, you know, I have competitors I really like a lot, but in business, you want to kill them. Let's face it, if anyone says that's not the truth, you know, I mean, not.
Brian.
But we're getting you a card anyway. Oh, what's the question? What do I think what does?
Companies like bonobos with kind
Well,
of
it's not a matter. Look, here's what companies do great. They have creative leadership. They don't try to be something they're not. They're not copying all the time. I invested in them on the board of Warby Parker. Why? Because they do what they do when no one else does it, okay? That's why. I like them, and they're eager to learn, and they're not trying to be cone optical or lens crafter, okay? I like what they do. I like companies where the leadership is enmeshed, involved, they're passionate, and it's not a money-making MBA thing, no offense, okay? Because everyone's going online, it's not apparel. You all know. You're an investor? Because I see it says, do you invest? No, okay. Trader, a trader. No, but I like companies where someone invents or creates a space and goes after it, and I always say puts their own twist. But I think they're a great company. Warby Parker is great, but you know something, like every other company, they need to make money better than they do, because that's the way it is. And you can invent something, and if you invest in online, I wish we were called an online company. If they just said J.Crew Group is an online tech company, hello, $20 billion net worth, you know? I know the profits of a lot of these companies. And you know something? Or the lack thereof. And unless I'm going to bet on someone to break through in an environment, I don't want to be, but I'm not a good investor anyway. I really don't invest much. Warby I liked because they invented a business that no one else is in. Cool $100 eyeglasses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's personal opinion. Okay.
Brian.
We've been talking a lot about the brand side, but with all the competition, whether it be online, offline, what initiatives are you taking to connect with consumers?
Say again, what initiatives?
What initiatives are you taking to connect with consumers in terms of, I mean, there's 20 companies that make jeans probably very similar to yours. It has to be that sustainable loyalty.
Yeah, well,
are you taking initiatives like that was, yeah.
Like what? I'm going to ask, here's the thing, every single day, whether we succeed or not, I say it's emotional. What is that? Oh, 5 minutes. Every day, and it's a really good question because we're interviewing for a new head of marketing right now, and all I want to do is connect emotionally with a consumer. I want them to know what we say they feel. Like the New York Magazine ad we ran, I'm looking at the two of you probably know. It was, we got a letter, someone said bring back the old
bathing suit.
Look, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to say to every consumer in the world the following, but I can't say it. And
so I don't know if you all know about that, but somebody wrote a letter saying they wanted a certain type of bathing suit brought back.
And we brought it back, but we do that all the time. We do it, but you know, and I always say this, I said, this is what I want people to know, and then if you could help us let them know it. Our quality and value component is, I think, stand up, say it.
Quality, value,
emotional, right. Service, well, she doesn't have a microphone.
Somebody
She's
give her
pregnant.
a microphone.
Okay, give her a microphone. And you were looking for a head of marketing job. No, say what it is.
Did you plant her in the audience?
I don't even know her. But I love her.
Thank you. I agree. I'm somebody who buys high-low and in between, but for me, the J.Crew differentiation is there's an emotional connection, there's service, there's ease, so I can order online, I can return it around the corner, there's a personal shopper, and there's consistency and value.
Yeah,
and I also think what you've done very well is, without going too broad, I'm tall. I can get something in a tall length.
Yeah.
So you've adapted to needs.
She's tall. She can get something in a tall length.
And now pregnant, I can get tall maternity pants.
But you know what it is? I think the emotion is how we work and who we are. But it's a really good question because every day I want to say what she's saying. I want to say, send me an email and we will take care of it that minute. And you shouldn't have to send me an email, and I know by that. But the emotional connection, do you check out our website? Do you blog? All the blogging, all that. We just won the Webby Award for great design. So I think that's what we do. We're trying to do it more and more. Because the breaking through when there's 20 people selling jeans, it is such a commodity world we live in. And the bullshit you get from so many companies say, by the way, it's not apparel, it's every company. You know, GM, they should design good cars besides take care of their customers. Let them design good cars. and then we'll see what happens. But you can get good grades in business for not building a great company. You know that because you're a trader. We have 2 more minutes or whatever.
Yeah, I think we can do one more question. Maybe down here.
Hi, nice to meet you.
My
name is Clary. I am here with the University of Southern California. There are some students here in the audience.
Oh, really? Who are they? The students? Where are
yeah,
they?
If you stand
USC
up.
students?
Yes. There's one right there.
Where?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
You're a senior?
Yes.
Looking for a job?
Yes,
How's the
I'm a
job
graduate
market?
student. The job market is very competitive, which
It
is
is
what I
tough.
wanted to ask about. A couple of us are graduating in a couple of weeks, and you began this conversation talking about resumes and undoctored resumes, and a lot of us are given so much advice on how
crazy, I know.
to make our
It's
resumes
bad.
stand out. They should smell like roses. They should be digital.
And you shouldn't say you're a waitress. You
Yeah.
shouldn't say you worked as a construction worker. Liz knows. She sits there listening. I say put everything on the resume that you didn't do, but go ahead.
But that you should say that you've been to 19 countries. And you said that you look for unmanufactured resumes, and I would love if you could elaborate on what that means.
Well, it's an unmanufactured person. By the way, they all are, you're taught by colleges to be a certain way. It used to work. It doesn't work anymore because the world is so changed. Look at the business heroes. They're all these like, they didn't graduate college. I'm not saying you graduate, please. Yeah, right, in 2 weeks. But I'm not going to change the world. When I speak, I spoke at Yale last week. Jeff Sonnenfeld, who's an old friend, so I go there once a year. And I tell them, I don't care about your MBAs. No offense to whoever had one. But what do you do, by the way? Investing. That's where all the money is anyway. Not trading. No, I just think it's not going to change. And what I found is I fight everything. I'm just like but you have to figure out your own world. And your first job or two is going to be a job that you learn on. You're going to figure it all out. Ask me how many great bosses I had. None. Okay, that's my time's up. But I don't want to end it at that. I had a lot of people I learned from. In fact, our chief investor, Jim Coulter's here from TPG in the other room. I love Jim because he's a great board member and thoughtful and understanding. How do you like that for a whatever ending?
Well, thank you for joining us today,
Thank you.
Mickey.